the final frontier, I think. I'm not really sure. It's kind of unlimited and infinite, for it to be final. It's one of the things I kind of never understood about Star Trek. Star Trek is always like space, the final frontier. And I'm like, how is it final? You have no idea. It could lead to some like other alternate dimension. So but that kind of goes on with the theme of this episode as we see Brad Pitt journey to the outer edges of, wait, he's only going to the solar system? That's it? He doesn't even go past Pluto? He goes to fucking Neptune?
Yeah, he doesn't go that far.
To find his dad and save humanity. Well, kind of, sort of, but that's what we're here to talk about. I am
Guardians
once again...
of the Galaxy?
No, not that. I am once again Dom, the movie nerd, the one and only. By the way, are we just going to make that like my official title now? Just like Dom, the movie nerd? Like forget my last name, just be like Dom, the movie nerd?
I think it's fitting.
All right, that's what I think too. And I'm back once again with my very faithful co-host, Chris Evenko. Chris, how you doing?
What's going on, guys? Great to be here yet again.
Always.
Great to have the first few episodes out in the air, and now this one too.
Definitely. We're going to do that. That's going to be... That's going to be fun. But we're not here to talk about our previous efforts. We're here to talk about the thing that we have going on today, which is, Chris, what are we talking about today?
Today we're talking about Ad Astra. What
does that mean? Ad Astra. I know what it means.
To the stars.
He knows his Latin. That's Latin, right?
It means to the stars in Latin.
All right.
And I learned that because they said it in the movie.
Oh, damn. That must have been one of the parts that I fell asleep during.
Yeah. And that's how I know that.
Yep.
And, another thing I know is that I don't want to start off this conversation because I have opinions on this movie, but...
Ooh, so something tells me that they're not going to exactly be the greatest of opinions. I mean, well, I shouldn't... You know what? I shouldn't say that because friggin' opinions are subjective. There's no such thing as a good or bad opinion. It's just the internet has put that mantra in our minds because fuck the internet. But
fuck the internet.
Fuck the internet. Sir, oh my god, fuck the internet. So Ad Astra, it's the new movie from James Gray, who is a director that I have kind of been unfamiliar with over the until very recently. He did one movie that I know of from 2007 with Joaquin Phoenix and Mark Wahlberg called We Own the Night, which I heard was good. And he also did a movie 2 years ago with Charlie Hunnam, Robert Pattinson, and Tom Holland called The Lost City of Z, which I heard was pretty good. But I haven't seen, those are just movies that I've heard of. I haven't seen anything from this guy, so I really didn't know what his style was like beforehand. So this was kind of a new experience because this is one of the first times where I'm going into a movie for a director with an already established track record. And usually what I try to do with that case is that if they're a well-known director, I try to watch some of their movies beforehand just so I can get like a sense of their style. Like I did that with Jason Reitman for Young Adult and Men, Women, and Children. I watched those two movies before I watched Tully, which he did last year, which I really, really liked. I very, very much enjoyed that movie, even with the twist ending. And which again, to me, that's not really a twist because I kind of saw it coming. But yeah, with this movie, James Gray directs Brad Pitt as Roy McBride, who is an astronaut who is called in by NASA and discovers that there's a series of electrical surges that are going throughout the solar system, and they're messing with everybody's electricity, and it's causing worldwide havoc. Probably the best way that I can preface the intro of this movie is that it's Armageddon, but for intellectuals. If I had to probably say that in the smartest, easiest to get across way possible. And so it's in the future. We're to the point where mankind and humanity has colonized the moon. The moon has kind of become like a tourist trap spot. There's a little bit of narration in order to help explain a lot of what's going on.
There's an Applebee's.
There is an Applebee's on the moon, yes. And so the whole thing is that it's revealed that Brad Pitt's father in the movie, Clifford McBride, portrayed by Tommy Lee Jones, was one of the forebearers of this project called the Lima Project, which was an experiment to journey to the outer reaches of the solar system in order to try and discover if extraterrestrial life is a thing. And so, but they assumed that mission was compromised because they haven't heard from it in years, and it was assumed that his dad was dead. And all of a sudden, he's brought in to do this mission after these electrical surges are happening and kind of fucking around with everything on Earth. And he's basically told by NASA, yeah, we're pretty sure your dad is alive, and that the Lima Project, that's the name of the project, is responsible for these surges. And we need you to go to Mars by way of the moon in order to try and make contact with your dad, so that we can find out what the fuck is happening. And that's basically the general gist of this movie. Chris, how do you think I did with that?
It's pretty accurate.
Thanks.
Yeah, it's a very accurate summarization.
Yeah.
I think let's talk about the nit and grit of it though. So that's sort of
that's
general,
kind of what we're here to do, right?
Exactly. So that's sort of a general overview of what the film is, but what did you think of the film?
Now, what I thought, well, I thought that's funny because we always do this thing where you always kind of ask my opinion first, me as the host, obviously, so that makes sense, but I kind of wanted to get your thought process on it first, because my thing that I do is I always like to not kind of tell people why they're wrong, but I like hearing other people's thought processes and kind of like picking apart
you like
and
to tell
figuring.
people why
I
they're
really
wrong.
do. I really fucking do. I get a lot of satisfaction
It's
from it.
all
But
right.
hey, that's
I'll
the one
play
thing that sets
into
me
it.
apart. I'll be honest about that up front and foremost. That's something that nobody else will do. But in all seriousness, I like picking apart people's brains and kind of figuring out where they're coming from with an argument, because it usually gives me a lot of credence and kind of, I would like to think, helps me make me a better critic overall. Is that the whole thing that we always talk about with the internet, and kind of the reason behind this show is that everyone kind of always is just shouting and screaming their voices into the void without actually listening to anybody else. And that's kind of what I want to change. I want to be somebody who listens to other people's opinions and kind of not validate them per se, but kind of just like get an understanding of where they're coming from. So Chris, what did you think of Ad Astra, or To the Stars?
I think that for as much good as there was in this movie,
There was a lot of it.
There was a lot of it. There was a lot, equal amounts share of terrible. And what do I mean by that? So the first thing that I want to talk about is the special effects and the set design.
Amazing.
Loved it.
Amazing.
I loved it. I love that there was like an Applebee's on the moon. I love that there was a Subway on the moon. I love that it's the first movie that felt tangible as far as what getting to that point of society could feel like. And so that was really cool to me. I thought it was very interesting to sort of see the way that people were just like, yeah, okay, I'm on the moon. It's not a big deal. We're on the moon. I work here. I live here. I was born here. I'm like a third generation moon child, and
Yeah.
that's
Moon
fine.
children
I've only
and
been to
Mars
Earth
children.
once,
Like,
and-
that's the thing. Like, the idea of legit aliens that are also human in this world is a thing. Because, like, when he gets to Mars and meets Ruth Negga, she's like, yeah, I was born here. I'm like, holy shit.
And I
like,
love
that's
that,
crazy to think that we're at that point in the future, where we're just like, yeah, we're settling on the moon. That's like, I feel like that Stanley Kubrick's vision actually brought to life.
Yeah, exactly. And I love that the Space Force wasn't a silly thing. It was, well, how do you police
Space.
the solar system? You need a team of specialists just like you do on Earth. You need cops to patrol the counties and make sure you know what I'm trying to say. And I thought that was really cool. And it felt real. Like the thing I would say about all of this is that visually, the special effects, it felt real. It felt like that's what it would look like in space. The set design and the way that they, like, we spent a lot of time on the moon. So I'm going to go to the moon a little bit more over Mars. But even Mars felt like, okay, this is what it would be like to colonize Mars.
I thought Mars was the whole second act. Moon was just the transition from the first to the second act, and as opposed, I felt like we spent more time on Mars. I mean, I could be totally wrong, but just because Mars was the whole second act, so
I felt like, yeah, you were on. Okay, so I guess let me rephrase that. A lot more happened on the moon.
All right, yeah, okay, I get. Okay, now, okay, I get what you're coming from.
There was a lot more, I think, to go off of from when we were on the moon than when we were on for Mars. But so one of the things I think that was really winning for this movie was the set design and the special effects. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, but that's no question. Like, I feel like that's kind of like if you're doing a space movie, a movie a movie that's primarily set in space, and those aren't like the two things that immediately get nailed right off the bat, then you're clearly doing something wrong. So I mean,
Right.
yeah, they got that because by nature of the beast, they're doing a movie in space. They kind of have to.
And with their budget, they should have nailed it.
Yeah, definitely.
So I'm giving that the win column check mark there, but it's sort of like should be a given. Yeah. Now the other thing I really liked about the movie was like the costumes. It felt believable. Like it wasn't nothing was over the top. It didn't get in the way of the narrative. It didn't get in the way of the story. Like it was cool. It was the setting, but it wasn't like a Blade Runner where like sometimes the environment sort of takes away from the story because it's so overwhelming and in your face.
Oh,
it wasn't
really?
that kind of sci-fi.
I never got that sense from some. To me, like, that's what makes good sci-fi is when you have a setting like that, where the setting becomes a part of the story.
I guess it depends on what you're looking for. For me, though, I was looking for more of a narrative in this movie, and I felt that it was stitched together at best.
Definitely. Okay. And
I think that there was poor choices in post. I'm just speculating here, everyone, just so you know. But to me, having Brad Pitt give narration throughout the course of the film, that seemingly made me feel like, oh, this director thinks I'm an idiot. That my eyes don't work, and I have to have him say what is exactly happening on screen and how he's feeling. that just feels like really, that makes me think that it tested poorly, and that they're like, how do we save this film? And that was like their, let's do this. So that, and aside, we can dive more into the plot. I want to start there, and let's crack this egg open as we go, because I have much issues with the plot of this movie.
Definitely. And I'm not gonna lie, you're honest. You're actually right in a lot of sense. This is a movie that has been in post-production hell for a long time. This movie was originally supposed to come out last year. I remember the first thing I heard about this movie was going through Wikipedia and like just looking forward to like what else to watch for the rest of the year of 2018 last year. And I saw it, and I'm like, ooh, what is this? And I clicked on it, and I'm like, yeah. I mean, the words Brad Pitt space movie immediately stood out in my mind, but I was taking a little bit more of a deeper look into it. I'm like, oh no, this actually sounds really interesting. And after having finally saw this movie, you're right. This movie was a post-production nightmare, and there were a lot of parts of this movie that felt stitched in and put together last minute because it wasn't testing very well with test audiences. But I also know, and I think this is probably the reason of when we eventually get to my overall final points on this movie as to why I think this way. I feel like this is one of the few instances, just if we're getting into my general thoughts, this is one of the few instances where my overall feeling towards what the movie is trying to get across overrides all other problems that I have with it. And you're right, those are legitimate problems, all of which that you have brought up. But that is one sense where I feel like the thematic tone of what this movie is trying to go for in terms of, you know, our relationships with the ones who influence us the most. I feel like that was like that theme was so strong to me that like all the other ancillary stuff, to the point where the other ancillary stuff about like the actual kind of space almost took a backseat, to the point where you're right, you literally have Brad Pitt just narrating that they've commercialized the moon. I'm like, no, go more so into that, you know, rather than just have like one space chase and boom, you know, they're taking off to Mars. I'm like, no, go into that. I want to see like a little bit of the history of the commercialization of the moon. So in a way, I feel like maybe the central theme and trajectory of this movie, pun intended, maybe almost took away from some of the elements that I love about sci-fi. Because you were talking about, you know, some of like a Blade Runner where the world is so intriguing and investigating they can take away from the plot. To me, at least, I find that an increasingly creative world like that, to me, is what makes a movie like that. Because what I found is that in terms of overall storytelling, I found that there's very, very few stories that are actually like really different and unique, and that it's kind of like the same if you think about it, Hollywood really has been recycling the same 6 or 7, not stories, but story ideas, just with different characters and settings and all that. So to me, I find that the more intrinsic the setting is, in order to help flesh out the theme and the characters, that to me makes it. And so this was a situation where, in a way, I feel like I wasn't getting enough of the setting.
So I love Blade Runner. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. I don't think that there's any parlor tricks, so to speak, in the set design, in the costume design. But I think sometimes sci-fi goes a little too far.
What's like an example of one that like
feels like a parlor trick?
Yeah, where it feels like a parlor trick, but like to the point where it feels like it's distracting you from what's going on, and you feel like they're using it to overcompensate for what the story should be doing on its own.
What the story isn't doing, I would say,
right,
is Netflix's Altered Carbon is the first one that comes to mind. Really strong start. Yeah. Didn't like the series. That's a different episode. So I don't think this movie did that. But what I actually think that this movie didn't do that most sci-fi films do, that I think makes sci-fi films work, is it was just a little too open-ended. Like, pirates attack them on the moon. But why are there pirates? Like, what's going on in this?
Yeah, that is kind of one of those things. That is kind of one of those things where it's like, oh, it's in the background, and you should have like a good enough knowledge of like the world in general, and like socioeconomic politics that come from settling new areas in history, that like you should just that should come with common sense. I will say that's probably one of the things that probably would have helped in the narration, you know, if they'd focused on those areas rather than just kind of like having the narration be kind of like an inner monologue for Brad Pitt, which I don't mind that, because I like I said, I'm usually pretty hit or miss when it comes to narration. Like with me, voiceover narration like that either really works or it really doesn't. And this was one of those instances where I'm kind of in the middle on it.
It just makes me wonder, was the pirate scene literally just put in there to put some action in an otherwise very slow-moving movie? Or would it have been excused if the main storyline was strong enough where I wasn't invested into the main storyline, so I was looking for other things to latch onto because I was visually stimulated and intrigued, and I just wished that there was a stronger narrative. Brad Pitt's journey, it just sort of felt like, okay, well, I can't say no because my commanding officers are telling me to go, so it's not like it felt like he never really had a choice. And so that's fine, but his journey wasn't that interesting. It was pretty fucking clear and cut, straight line, planet to planet to planet to spaceship. It's like, okay, so all the other stuff that was cool that I want to know about, like why are there warring over why is the dark side of the moon a warring area? Like, I think in a good narrative, you forgive that and you don't need to know about that because that's just like cool shit that like maybe there's a spin-off or a comic of, but the main storyline just... I was looking for anything else to entertain me than the main storyline. Does that make sense what I'm trying to say?
No, I absolutely get what you're trying to say, but my question is, were you looking for entertainment in the sense that... You know what? No, I'm not going to go there because this is one of those movies that it's like, it's not setting out to entertain. So in that sense, I can kind of already tell that this was a movie that was going to turn heads because we talked about this ad nauseum in terms of movies that kind of only do well to entertaining. And a lot of people have broached the subject of, oh, well, movies shouldn't be made unless they're entertaining. And I am vehemently against that because that's a restriction on art and therefore a restriction on free speech and freedom of expression and shouldn't be a thing. My thing with this is, yes, it's absolutely not your... oh, they're going to space to fight space pirates and go on adventures. You know, that's not what this is. It's a very introspective film. It's a very personal film, I feel like, and that can turn off a lot of people, you know, because the whole thing about Hollywood epics is that a lot of the emotional stuff is always secondary as opposed to the primary storyline, which is what you're supposed to get invested in and be entertained by. A lot of the time when it comes to the personal stuff being up front and foremost, that's usually where it can get hit or miss. And in the sense of what you were talking about before with the post-production with James Gray, you're right. There were certain aspects where it felt like James Gray put those in there just to entertain audiences because audiences were bored. And that's I feel like that's another thing that we should talk about with this is the idea of audience expectations for movies, because I heard something similar to that, an argument similar to that on a Red Letter Media video recently where they were talking about the you know, referencing back to a previous episode of ours, It Chapter 2. And I don't know if you've ever watched Red Letter Media, but the redheaded guy, Jay, hated it like vehemently. And Jay's whole thing is Jay looks at movies a lot differently. And Jay and Mike, those guys for the most part, they don't like modern day audiences and their perception of most day movies. And Jay brings up the point where it's like, could you imagine if they're trying to do test screenings of The Shining now? Like, could you imagine, like, oh my God, people will be complaining every 3 seconds about how boring it is. And I was thinking about it, you know, Shining is obviously a cultural masterpiece, but I'm like, yeah, he's not wrong. Fucking, if they tried to release The Shining, you know, as it was back then today, they would never make it. There would be 15 million different subplots about the different ghosts of the hotel in order to try and make it more entertaining and palatable for a modern day mainstream audience. And again, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that because audiences deserve to be entertained, but it does kind of disappoint me where we talk about Disney controlling everything all the time and really only giving us one kind of entertainment. But I also think that, to me at least, a lot of the best films could always strike that good balance between being entertaining while also being really interesting and engaging. Like, a lot of my favorite movies of this year, a few of them, I don't know if I would necessarily call them entertaining per se. You know, like some of my favorite movies this year have been The Farewell and High Life and Her Smell. You know, and like a lot of them, like again, they have glamorization factors that help with the entertainment factors. But I find that again, a lot of my favorite stuff is turning out to be more and more personal human stories about people, and this is what felt like that to me.
Yeah. Okay, and that's fine, but it didn't. How do I word this? So I see what you're saying, and I think that it just didn't achieve the personal connection that I was hoping it achieved. I wasn't looking for...
You missed the personal connection, because the whole point of the latching on point for this movie is how are you going to emphasize with Brad Pitt and his reaction to discovering that his father is potentially, who he hasn't seen in years, is still alive, and that didn't hit it for you.
I have a great way to put it, right? So in a movie where the one thing that should feel real is the connection between father and son, everything else around it felt real. The science fiction, the moon bases, the Applebee's on the moon, Mars, people being born on Mars, all of the things that do not exist and do not feel real and we've never experienced and never will in our lifetime felt real, aside from the connection between father and son, aside from the main narrative. Nothing to me was compelling about Brad Pitt chasing after his father. It seemed like he was doing fine on his own. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah,
this
I get
movie
what you're
fell
trying to
short
say.
in the one area. It's like
So in
everything
that
else
sense,
I'm praising
is
it for. Everything else I'm praising it for. That's like an added bonus if you get it right. But without a plot that pulls you in, I mean, I can watch it from multiple perspectives because I appreciate more than one aspect of film. But if I was a normal consumer going to see this movie, and I did hear people yawning in theaters and saying, "Oh my God, it didn't have what a movie of its caliber is expected to have," and that's fine. But it didn't have something else that made it great, in my opinion.
Okay.
It just fell flat from a narrative perspective.
And that's fine, because I guess in that sense, so would you say that because, I don't know if that just comes down to the performances or the direction, but you just felt that because of with how Brad Pitt portrayed that type of a character, the struggle didn't feel as relevant or relatable in the sense of, because we've never been in the position where, for lack of a better word, daddy issues, that's always a thing that, like, you see, like, freaking, like, gets attributed to, like, sex and shit, kinky sex things and shit like that. But, maybe because we've never been in an instance where we can relate, per se, because we've never been in that situation where, oh, my dad is on the edge of the solar system doing work and I haven't heard from him in years, outside of, like, a few video recordings,
Yeah, I mean, I get it. No one's had that experience, but it's still, like, I didn't care about their family. Like, watching,
Well, because it was non-existent. That's the whole
Yeah,
thing.
that's what
Their
I'm
family
saying.
was non-existent, right? Their mom, like, you don't even see his mom except for, like, one flashback where she's, like, holding him and you could barely even see her face, like, barely even see her outline. Like, she's not even a character in the movie.
It's, for example, like, even a movie as, this just came to mind randomly, so it's the first example I have, but even a movie as silly as, like, let's say Meet the Fockers, for example, right? Like, I still care more about their family thread and their intertwined connection than I do about this movie, which is far more serious with a far more deeper meaning, far more internal struggle, air quotes, that's supposed to be presented, and it just sort of felt like a very lackluster performance, too. From pretty much all of the actors. Everything was so monotone and so serious, and which is fine for when it's supposed to be that way, but it never, like, I was never scared for them when the pirates were attacking them. I was never just like, oh, they shot a hole in his spacesuit, he's gonna die now. Like, I never...
Yeah, that sense of tension was kind of never there.
I wanted to care, man. I really like Brad Pitt, and I don't think it was a bad performance. Like, it's any other actor's best performance, but when you have literally one of the greatest actors of our time...
Yeah, who already gave one of the best performances of the year, too.
I was hoping for a hot streak, and I don't think I got that with this movie, and... everything else was great about this film, but the acting and the writing, and what, did they just need Liv Tyler in this movie? Because that's
the one thing I will say. Like, of all the things that were added in post-production that really didn't bother me, that was the only thing of where I felt, oh, yeah, that was added last minute, and it felt like a last-minute add, too. I'm like, wow, why does she even need to be in this movie? Like, in terms of, like, the humanization. It's definitely a situation where the post-production kind of fucked this movie, and it was also a thing of where, again, keep bringing this up, the Disney-Fox merger. This was another movie that, again, like, Fox was trying to produce, and they were not getting the money because they were getting ready for the Disney merger. That's literally what I'm just attributing every single Fox release this year to, regardless of whether it was actually affected by that or not, because you have to assume that it is, because Disney has gone out of their way to tank every single other Fox release. So the fact that this is one that for once didn't, but it still lost the box office to Downton Abbey, which is hilarious to me.
The movie.
But that should just show you, like, the state of theater going in general, like,
right. Well,
just theater going.
Let's change gears a bit here, right? So we know how I felt about it. Amazing cinematography, amazing special effects, super believable world building, but I could care less about the storyline. It wasn't compelling. I didn't care about the actors' performances. I think that's how I feel about it in a nutshell, right? So like I said from the top, it's around a 50-50 for me right now. Maybe as I think on it, my mind will change, but I don't think by that much, especially since I've had a week now to sort of digest and take this all in before this chat. And so, I mean, it felt like you were sort of going off of what I was saying, but, like, what does the movie nerd think about this film? Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Or do you have your own complete spin? Let's hear it, man.
I kind of went into my thoughts on it a little bit. So I'm not going to lie. I was super high the first time I watched this movie, and fell asleep during the entire second act. I fell
Pulling
asleep.
back the curtain.
Like, don't be real. Like, it was freaking like I was in and out throughout the first act. I barely knew what was going on. And it's like you said, like I'm high. It's monotone. Like I said, that stuff doesn't bother me, but it is a very monotone. It is a very slow paced movie. And
You've seen it once or twice now.
If I'm not in the zone to be able to take that in and appreciate that, then I'm gonna fall asleep. So I fell asleep during the entire Mars portion. Like I didn't remember a goddamn.
Have you seen it once or twice?
Watching it last night was my second time watching it.
Okay, so you're familiar with
Yes,
cool.
I'm familiar. I watched the movie in its
just so
entirety
everyone
now.
knows.
Yes,
Dom does his homework even when he gets too stoned
Always.
in the theater. He will recover for our
absolutely.
show.
No, every single movie that I've slept through, I have rewatched it at another point. Like, I rewatched Bohemian Rhapsody when I slept through that entire thing. I rewatched American Animals when I slept through that entire thing.
Now, what does that say about this film? No, seriously, let's unpack this. What does that say about this film? Because I've seen a lot of movies with you that you were high at and you do not fall asleep. But why this one did you fall asleep? What does that say about this film?
Well, that's the thing. Why was I high and I fell asleep during Bohemian Rhapsody?
Well, what does that say about that film?
Exactly.
Because
Or
there's
American
movies that
Animals.
you've been high for that you stayed awake for. I
Yeah.
don't think it's just because you were high in the theater you fell asleep, right? There's got to be more there. Or not there. You know what I'm trying to ask you?
It's also just a thing that I've like attributed to myself, you know, where it's like, you know, if I'm like not in the zone, you know, but like watching it a second time, like I'm not of the opinion that you should have to watch movies twice in the theater in order to get a full what's the word I'm looking for? In order to get a full picture of what to expect in order to really form an opinion on. But when I watched this a second time, and I said this to everyone, I'm like, thank freaking God I watched that a second time, because I felt like there was so much that I could appreciate about the movie. And it's like I said up top, it's to the point where all of those problems that people have, and again, they are legitimate problems, I just personally didn't have, because I found that the center struggle was very, very pressing and upfront, and I never once lost that. That was a thing of where I understood what Brad Pitt was feeling in the sense that it didn't really matter per se kind of how he perceived it or how he placed it, because the thing too is that if you want to talk about a realistic portrayal of somebody who worked for NASA, those guys gotta have, I was talking to my grandma about this yesterday, those guys gotta have nerves of steel. Freaking nerves of steel. Like, he is not, so it may come off as an emotionless performance. That's fine. That's what he's supposed to have. That's what the role, both literally and the role that he has within the movie itself, is forced to require. He is not allowed to have emotion. So in that sense, the fact that we got any emotion from that at all is amazing. And I just feel like kind of everything that was a build-up, it was one of those things where it's very, very dependent on the payoff. The build-up is very, very dependent on the payoff, because if you don't get that satisfaction, then the build-up, you just feel like you wasted your time, right? And that's the thing that I have said, and that a lot of other people have said, is that they hate to feel like they wasted their time with the movie. And the thing is that the reason why I wanted to give this one the benefit of the doubt and not wait another couple months before it leaked, and I wanted to see this right away, is because when I left the movie the first time, because here's the thing, I woke up just in time to catch the third act the first time around, so I caught the entire first act and the entire third act when I watched it the first time, and the third act is my favorite part of the movie, when he finally gets to the station and finds Tommy Lee Jones, but there were a few things that were missing. I'm like, okay, this doesn't make sense, but I just got that feeling, that moment, watching Tommy Lee Jones drift off into space, that I'm like, wow, there is like something so impressive about that. And I don't necessarily know if this comes from the movie itself. It might just come from the idea of the presentation of space and how it's another facet of nature, but at the same time, it's just such this strange, crazy organism in and of itself, where there's something so inherently fascinating, where there could literally be nothing happening but just the images where he's going from Mars to Neptune, and he's going in and out and dealing with, like, for lack of a better word, space dementia. I know, fucking, that's a term that Michael Bay made up in 1998, and it's stuck because he turned into fucking robot dementia in Transformers 5. We don't need to talk about that. Where you just see him going insane, and then it just cuts to the shot of the ship drifting past Jupiter. Those shots that I love of the camera, like suckered on the side of the craft, and you see like the outline of the planet. There's something so majestic about it, and they even dropped a line like that in the movie where they're driving on the moon as they're about to be chased by the space pirates, where they're like, "Yep, the big blue dome never ceases to amaze me." And I'm like, yeah, you're right. There is something so inherently amazing about the visuals and the idea of traveling through space. So this idea that it can be boring, a space movie can be boring to me, I've kind of never really understood that, because but again, that's coming from a very personal note of there's always something so inherently fascinating by space that, like I said, unless I'm to the point where I'm inebriated to the point where I can't even maintain consciousness, I'm never going to be bored by that, So that's probably the thing that, for lack of a better word, that kept me going through.
Right, I wasn't bored. I think I just have high expectations. Science fiction being one of my favorite genres, and it just fell short. Now I kind of want to switch gears a little bit and sort of speak about, like, we've had The Martian, we've had Interstellar, we've had Ad Astra.
First Man.
Gravity. Exactly. So this weird sort of
space subgenre is what I'm going to call it.
Yeah, that's come about in the 2010s. Do you think we see more of this, or?
I don't know, because the one thing that I like about all of those films is that you really can't compare any one of them because they're all different. Gravity and The Martian tackle the survivalist elements, and those aren't really like journeying through the cosmos. Those are just about surviving and the horrors of being in space, and tackling it from one from a very more realistic standpoint, for lack of a better word, versus one from a more big budget Hollywood standpoint. Tons of joke cracking, all that kind of stuff. And then you get situations like Interstellar and Ad Astra, which are journeying through the cosmos for both world-ending and personal reasons. And then you get something like First Man, which is kind of a beast in and of itself, where that's not even really about space. That's a biopic about the guy who we most attribute to space because he's the first guy to walk on the moon. So that's the thing about it, is I don't necessarily know if we do see more of these movies because it is such a niche, and you can't really compare it because every movie I feel like that comes out that tackles that kind of a subject matter does feel so different that I can't even necessarily compare them to, other than the fact of, there's a portion of them that are all in space.
It's like this weird subgenre of, like, hey, this is a space movie, not really a science fiction movie. There's no aliens, there's no laser beams, there's no lightsabers. You know what I'm saying? It's weird. It's cool, but it's weird.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's like we have a new type of science fiction, and if anything Ad Astra did, and this is why I brought it up, I feel like it took what its predecessors were doing, and now I know it's been in production for a while. It's been in
post-production hell.
But it almost seems perfect that it came out after these films had come before it, because it said, hey, let's take the realism of, like, a normal drama, and these other movies have it sprinkled in there throughout, but let's really just, like, take that and just put it in space, and it's like you're watching a soap opera in space.
Yeah, kind of, but
and it's weird. I don't know. Maybe that's another issue I have with this film. I was looking for more excitement. The trailer was very misleading, and
that's the problem. I barely remember the trailer. That's what they like. I'm just so sick of movie marketing in general to this point that I forget about most trailers. I'm not even kidding.
Well, for me, it was a factor because I had watched the trailer prior and was excited. I was excited for this movie, and I left disappointed. So that's the only reason why I bring up this new trend of movies that have all sort of left me feeling like, eh.
Yeah. And like I said, that's just not these types of space movies.
Yeah, that's me. That's just me.
Okay, that's just the feeling that these movies leave for you.
Yeah, I guess it's just, I know I'm not with the grain on that one, but I just have to throw that out there.
Right. No, and that's fine. Like, that's actually good. I didn't realize that you felt that way about Interstellar, because I love Interstellar. Out of this batch of movies, Interstellar is probably my favorite. And I know a lot of people that, like,
the twist at the end does not blow my mind. I'm like, oh, cool. He's, like, through the glass and he's there, but he's not. Okay, cool.
I don't know. It's just like
maybe I'm just an asshole. I don't know.
People always talk about, like, visual elements in movies and how we get so many movies are visuals and spectacle driven that I don't know. I feel like these are the one movies that actually deserve and warrant it, and I feel like those are the movies that, like, they never let me down in that sense. Like, I am always in awe, because the whole point of visuals and spectacle is it's supposed to leave you in awe, right? And I am always come away from these movies, even if it's something like, probably the one that I can think of the most where I thought that way is First Man, where First Man just felt so somber and so melodramatic to the point where it's like, oh my god, and the space sections to me were not nearly as wondrous as I feel like they should have been. So that's probably the only instance where the visual element wasn't enough and the human drama just wasn't there,
Yeah. Well, speaking of, like, the human drama, right? Like, that whole crew that he joins, and then they don't, and they just, like, are following their orders so intently, and he has to kill them.
That didn't feel believable. He doesn't even kill them. They're all, like, comical accidental deaths.
They do it to themselves. Yeah, they do it to themselves.
Comical accidental deaths. Like, I even said, I'm like, that whole sequence, and also with the way it's treated afterwards, that whole sequence is a farce. It is a freaking farce.
Yeah, exactly. That really annoyed me.
Yeah.
That I was like, oh, okay, so now I'm watching Three Stooges? They all just took themselves out?
Yeah. Like, really stupidly, too. Like, one flies forward and hits her head, and she's dead. The other guy tries to stab him, and fucking then he accidentally, like, then the idiot new pilot, who was the co-pilot when they were going from the moon to Mars.
Oh, the dude who freaked out?
Yeah, that dude who freaked out accidentally knocks a
pressure?
tank loose of nitrogen that, like, suffocates the other two. Yeah, that entire sequence is a farce. Absolutely.
100%. And it felt insulting to me as an audience member watching that sequence in such a serious film.
See, to me, that was a thing of where it just happened so quickly where I'm like, okay, you needed these guys to get these guys out of the way. Yeah, it could have been handled better, but this, again, it doesn't bother me.
Right, you had to get him out of the way because it's about a man and his father. But
that was the instance where it's like, okay, that felt like this didn't feel necessarily natural to the story. Because the other thing, too, is why, also the other problem that spawns, too, is why then, you know that in any conceivable sense, even if he wasn't responsible, he would be held accountable for those men's deaths, and that there's no accountability for that at all. Like, that is a problem. Like, he just comes back and everything's hunky-dory. You know?
Yeah, that was frustrating as well.
And the one thing that I will say that does kind of explain it away is he says, oh, I have to hope that the passage of time, like, by the time I get back, because he's going to Neptune. Neptune is, like, what, months away? Like, years even, or something like that. So by the time he gets back to Earth, like, is anybody even going to give a shit about those three or how they died, They're just going to attribute that to, like, an accident,
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Who knows, man? Because it didn't seem to matter that they died.
Yeah.
It didn't seem to matter to anyone.
It's very Tarkovsky-like, in the sense of, I find it to be, or I watched a little bit in school 2 semesters ago. I watched a little bit of the original 1971 Solaris, directed by Andrei Tarkovsky, which was remade by Steven Soderbergh in 2002, starring George Clooney. And that was probably the closest comparison I could think of in terms of this movie, where it's not quite Kubrick in the sense of where the characters literally feel like mannequins that are just there in order to kind of be embodiments of the theme and be played around with by the theme. Like, they were actual characters in this movie. That's why I don't want to say that it's like very Kubrickian, because also there's a fact of like there's nobody else that does Kubrick besides Kubrick. That's why I don't really understand why anybody ever compares any other director to him, because I have still not seen a single director that has done what Kubrick did with his movies. But with Tarkovsky, with the original Solaris, I found that was asking a lot of similar questions and kind of, for lack of a better word, giving a lot of human responses and emotions that didn't necessarily feel relatable, because they're not the sense of, oh, what would I do if I was in that situation? This isn't the type of movie that's going out of its way to kind of make Brad Pitt the everyman that everyone relates to. Like, he is a very specific kind of a character, and James Gray does have a very specific vision with what he's trying to do with it, And I feel like that sense is translated across so well. Like, he nails that so immediately out of the gate. And I think Brad Pitt does such a good job of getting across those emotions with something that is arguably, like you said, monotone. The fact that I am getting all of those beats from him with barely any tonal inflections. Like, to me, that is a masterful performance,
I couldn't disagree more. But I see your point. I just couldn't disagree more.
That's kind of just where my brain goes.
Yeah, and I guess we won't agree on everything. Now, I got to know what you think about this before we wrap this up and get out of here. The monkeys.
The monkey, but also Tommy Lee Jones. We didn't talk about him at all. I wanted to talk about him and how that might be my favorite Tommy Lee Jones performance, ever.
Okay, let's talk about it. First off, how bullshit was once those monkeys came and ate that astronaut.
The one monkey, that was.
I said to myself,
that was
what am I
dumb.
watching?
Yeah, that was dumb.
This is terrible. What is this, a jump scare in the middle of a space movie?
Yeah.
Like, this isn't Aliens. Get that out of here. That soured my
the
mood.
one thing that I will say is that the movie kind of did tell you a little bit of, like, when you do have
tone was not apparent.
You do have Brad Pitt there kind of saying, like, okay, why are we stopping here? Like, he kind of does have that, but again, they do go out of its way, and in terms of, like, fleshing out and playing around with the world, where it's like, yeah, we're kind of, we're expected to stop here. This is part of our protocol, and if you want us to keep going, you have to explain to us why, the mission, because the whole thing is the mission is a secret mission. So the whole thing is, you're just like a guest here, so you kind of have to go along with us, So in that sense, that made sense to me. The whole thing with the monkey, it was fine. It was whatever, it was the scene itself. I'm like, whatever. I don't really get why this has to be this, why we have to have an alien in, an alien-esque scene in the middle of space. Again, that's one of those moments. That's probably another one of those moments where, again, it's them having to put in a little bit of Hollywood in order to appeal to the masses, and but again, it was so quick, it didn't bother me, and I think that's probably what gets me through a lot of the scenes that you have a problem with, is because I was so locked on to the main tension and struggle that all of these little things kind of just felt like visual representations of the world without having to explain a lot. And I really, really did admire this movie for that, because that's not what a lot of movies do now.
I'm okay that there wasn't the generic space character who explains everything verbatim. That's fine. But I don't.
Well, except for Ruth Negga. When he gets to Mars, she basically explains everything and kind of fills in the portion that is missing that NASA didn't tell him.
But that was
where Tommy Lee Jones goes insane and killed everyone when they tried to rebel against him because they were on the edge of the solar system and they weren't having any luck with their mission, and so they wanted to go home. And fucking Tommy Lee Jones, who had gone insane by that point. And I do think that with very little screen time too, Tommy Lee Jones did a very good job kind of stressing kind of how his character had gone off the deep end, and but you also still understood, oh my god, this is why this guy is revered as one of the pioneers of his generation. I got all of that with 5-10 minutes of screen time, and I feel because I got such a strong sense from that, I very much feel that is why that is one of my favorite Tommy Lee Jones performances, because Tommy Lee Jones has kind of gotten this rap in the age of the internet where a lot of his personal behind the scenes things once again bleed over into his performances. And I don't have a problem with that. It kind of does make a lot of his performances come off as stale to me and not nearly as interesting as they could be. Granted, I love him in Men in Black. He's very entertaining to watch in Batman Forever, even though that's not one of his best performances. And, yeah. And I also think that the moment where Brad Pitt kind of has to let his dad go because his dad's not going to come back, and just seeing that imagery, just images, having that kind of emotional resonance on me, seeing him drift off into space, I was like, wow, that is, oh my god. And how when Brad Pitt screams, it's not the typical Hollywood, no, it's kind of it's kind of this faint echo in your ears, and they're playing around with the sound where you can hear it and you can sense that it's loud, but it's not actually loud because you're only hearing kind of the echoes of it, right? I think that was masterful.
I'll give you that.
In that sense.
I thought the sound and the score was brilliant. I like how you really felt the vacuum.
Yeah, absolutely impeccable.
This is one of those movies I would recommend. I would recommend seeing every movie in a theater if gets the theatrical release. But this is one of those movies that I think it's going to be different at home.
Yes,
if it's your first time, even with the best surround sound, there's something about the feeling that the vacuum. They really did a good job creating a vacuum in this movie. Unlike other. People have come close.
Yes.
This was particularly
I'd say that Interstellar came the closest, but again, the whole thing with Interstellar is that there was always kind of a destination, for lack of a better word, and so going kind of the idea of going into the unknown and, with the pretty visuals and everything, versus this kind of there was always kind of a sense of dread that you knew that whatever happened, Brad Pitt was not going to like what he found
score,
on the other side.
I actually like, for as
I
much
love the score.
of
That score is masterful to me.
Yeah,
that's probably going to make it into my top 5, best scores of the year so far.
See where I'm going with that is, for as minimalistic as the plot was and as the way this movie left me feeling, and as I feel like I'm trying to say I wanted more out of this film for the most part, but I do think that if we had gotten more in the areas that I have my gripes with, as I've said a few times already throughout the course of this chat, the score being so minimalistic, it would have been even better. It was still an amazing score. I just the score did what the plot did, whereas I think I wanted more from the plot, but the score was just the perfect accent to every moment. It sort of saved some moments for me, is what I'm trying to say. It made some silly moments oh shit, this is some serious music. I'm thinking now. I'm thinking again. The score made me think again, where I was maybe wondering about...
Oh yeah, this music's making me think, yeah. Even though what I'm watching is, in my mind, is dumb as fuck.
I don't think it's dumb as fuck, but whereas maybe I was thinking about where my buddies and I who went and saw this movie were gonna go eat afterwards, then a serious note came on in the score and I was back in the movie.
Yeah. This is not the type of movie that you go to with your buddies in order to have a great time and go out and eat and talk about afterwards. This is not that kind of a movie.
Yeah. Well, that's how it made me feel.
What's the matter? Hit a nerve there?
No. Inside jokes. But anyways, I think I kind of think I've honestly said all I can say about it.
Yeah.
I think it wasn't an unenjoyable experience. I just felt that with the caliber of actors in the movie and with the budget that I had heard going into it and with how long it had been worked on,
yeah. And again, it's one of those instances.
And I didn't get more.
Again, it's one of those instances where I'm amazed that a movie like that, with the budget that it had, with the subject matter that it had to get released in this year. Again, it goes back to one of the same arguments that I did when we did Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I am amazed that a movie like this can be released in theaters in 2019 and at the very least make a decent amount of money. Well, granted, and like I said, it's opening weekend, so we'll see how it does box office wise, but yeah. And so without a doubt, for lack of a better word, for giving me such a different and interesting and intriguing kind of experience, this is, as of right now, it's my number 10. It's one of my favorite movies of the year. I really, really enjoyed this movie. I really did.
Okay, it would not be on my top 10 list.
Yeah,
it's not on my most hated list.
Would it be your worst list?
No. It's a movie. It's fine.
Yeah,
it's fine.
Can I just ask something? So when we do, when it comes to the end of the year, we end up doing like top 10 best, worst of the year, decade, whatever we end up doing. I'd be very interested to rattle off, have an episode where you kind of just interview me and ask me about my worst of the year, and I just go through it and kind of explain like all the terrible movies that I watched, because I found some amazing gems this year that are like,
okay,
oh,
I'm
they're
cool with
awful,
doing an episode about
amazing.
this. Sounds fun.
That would be great.
Sounds fun. And give me some movies to watch in preparation for that. I gotta do some homework.
Yeah, you know that. Just text me anytime.
So, as per tradition of our show, if I had to give it a review, 6 out of 10.
You mean a star rating?
If I had to give it a star rating, 2 out of 10. 2 out of 5.
2 out of 5. On Letterboxd,
okay.
on
2.25 maybe. I don't know, my own custom rating.
On Letterboxd, you're fine. I used to do that shit all the time. No, I gave this. If I'm giving this on Letterboxd, I gave this a 4 out of 5, which is the equivalent of about an 8 out of 10 for me, because the whole thing is that a lot of the stuff was there. Like I said, just those few moments that didn't quite work for me. I feel like the Ruth Negga character and kind of the whole Mars section, I feel like that could have been more well done. I feel like that was probably the section of the movie that was the most lacking to me. The Liv Tyler stuff, which literally felt like an afterthought, both probably in production and while watching it in the movie. A couple parts with the Donald Sutherland character that didn't quite work for me, where I'm like, he's kind of just there to kind of like act as the conduit, as like, oh, I'm the guy who knew your dad, I kind of wish there was a little bit more history there and a little bit more backdrop of, oh, that character kind of just comes in, explains away some stuff, gives him the next piece of the plot, and then dies, literally. So that kind of makes me a little bit disappointed in the sense of wasted Donald Sutherland. But yeah, for all the reasons that I already listed, that this is a 4 out of 5 movie. I really, really enjoyed this movie.
Yeah, I would say that if you're a casual moviegoer, maybe you skip this one. You wouldn't be upset about missing it, but if you
I would agree with that.
Yeah, but if you do appreciate film, or if you at least enjoy supporting the arts and getting out there and seeing a movie, regardless of what it is, and you can dissect and take away different parts of a movie that are good and bad, as opposed to just looking at it from like a head-on perspective, give this movie a shot. I'm curious to see what you think about that.
Yeah, definitely. And like I said, I already said that, this is one of my favorite movies of the year. It doesn't mean I don't have problems with it. I had just listed off like a laundry list of problems that I had that I'm like, no, these are legitimate problems,
Yeah.
So, just shows you, art is subjective. You don't have to like everything universally. There are parts of some of my favorite movies ever that I'm like, why the fuck is this in here? And there are parts of some of the most garbage movies I've ever seen I really freaking enjoy.
Yeah, and then I guess I'll just leave you guys with, a thank you for listening. We appreciate it. We'll have social medias up at the time of this recording. We can't plug them right now. We're actually, I'm going to just pull the curtain back here, We're going to make them after this episode, and we're going to get this going for you guys. But what I can say is we have episodes on Stranger Things, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and It Too already out. So if you like this chat and you want to hear more of us just clowning around, we have a couple guests on those episodes. And it was just a good time, and just like this was. So thank you guys for listening and allowing us to challenge our perception on film with an audience. It's nice to critique things in under the gun, not just see something and brain dump it.
In an intellectual way that doesn't feel like we're just shouting and not making any sense.
It's nice to not just see something and say like, oh, that was fun, and then brain dump it and forget about it. It's cool to challenge yourself. So it's nice to have you guys along for the journey.
Of course, and watch more movies. Like, come on, guys, stop fucking watching Netflix. Watch more movies.
Watch more movies. Once again, my name's Chris.
And I'm Dom.
And we want to thank you guys for watching our show, our podcast, Talkin TV. Until next time.